the industry is pushing people there, right? We've lost the balance point of health, and now we're doing too much. It's almost like we're biohacking. Carbs are bad. We should only eat protein. Go vegan. It's all so extreme. We've lost that balance point, but it's pushing people with chronic stress and trauma deep into that piece of their nervous system. There's a problem with that.
Welcome to The Body Never Lies. I'm your host, Leela Lutz. Each week, myself and experts from around the world help you uncover the secret ways your body communicates with you to empower you in your own individual health journey. Now, nutrition has to be one of the most overwhelming and confusing topics in the area of health. So much so that I've actually got a few episodes on the foundations of nutrition in this series. Now, I wanted to start with something that I feel is so overlooked in health practice across the board, and that is our metabolism and how food works with our physiology. I feel like if everyone understood this, then we would stop all the craziness and it would all be so much easier. This week's guest, Josh Rubin, is a certified nutritionist, neuromuscular therapist, and a doctor of osteopathic medicine and manual therapy student, as well as a former faculty member of the CHEK Institute. Through over 15 years of research and experience with their clients, he and his wife Jeanne have developed a revolutionising nutrition method that teaches each person how to use food in a strategic manner to do for the body what it is not able to do for itself. Self-regulate. Hi, Josh Rubin. Welcome to The Body Never Lies. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
I have brought you on today to talk about something that I feel is super important and is so missed, not only by my clients, but I feel like other practitioners, health coaches, because people are coming to me with, nutrition programs from other health practitioners, and this is really missed. And I was even looking at some new health coaching courses that are around at the moment, and it's not even in the prospectus of health coaching courses. So what I want to talk about today is what I believe to be fundamental to nutrition, and I know you believe to be fundamental to nutrition, and that is metabolism and the basics of metabolism. I don't remember I think it was one of the, a little bit of background, Josh is from the CHEK faculty, that's how we know each other, but he's a nutritionist and is doing osteopathic medicine. But I don't know if you remember, there was a book in the CHEK reading list, and it was one of the first books I ever read in health, and it was Fighting the Female Fat Cell.
Vaguely.
So like 80s with like this 80s aerobics lady on the front. And all I read in that book was if you don't eat, you get fat.
Yeah.
You don't eat, if you skip meals, you get fat. And so I've never wanted to skip, but that was like basics, like 20, I won't say how long ago it was. But so knowing that you're an absolute expert in this and you have taught me so much more with my clients, and not only that, have helped me with my thyroid health, I'm going to give the floor over to you and talk about the basics of nutrition that we're missing out on.
Well, something I always say is I think our industry is completely lost, right? And you see it because you look at our society and what people are struggling with. When I came into this industry, early 2000s, like 20 years ago, and I started working with people one-on-one, it was about teaching people how to eat organic food, how not to eat genetically modified food. And that's all it was, and never really talked about major thyroid issues, autoimmune issues, candida, H. pylori, parasites, all these things. It wasn't even like on the map. And then as my, career over the past 20 years kept progressing, you started to see these things come in, right? It's like the adrenal fatigue thing came in. And then that kind of was there, but it's on the back burner. And then the H. pylori parasite thing came in. And then that sat in the back burner with adrenal fatigue. Then it was like candida. Everyone's got candida. Let's kill candida. And then it was SIBO. You keep going. And now the most prevalent thing I hear when talking to people on the phone, that are interested in working with us is I have an autoimmune disease, right? And when we look at what an autoimmune disease is, it's a progression. Meaning we know that someone, when they have an autoimmune disease, they've been in this chronic stressed state for a long period of time. Long period could be 5 years, could be 10, could be 20, could be longer. It's usually longer. And who knows? Sometimes we know why why we've been in that state. Sometimes we have no clue, and sometimes we just completely ignored it, like, which is usually part of the equation. And that's a problem. It's a problem because it shows us the state of our society, but it's a problem and shows us how all these restrictive diets, system-specific diets, just don't work. And I say that with 100% certainty, they don't work. Why? Because we're chasing symptoms, which is exhausting. And that's not who we are as human beings, right? Just because you have a symptom doesn't mean you have that disease. And just because you don't have that symptom, right, doesn't mean you're healthy. So we have to look at this and say something's wrong. And the biggest problem is this: everyone's coming out with a new diet for the gut. They're coming out with a new diet for the immune system. They're coming out with a new diet for Candida, H. pylori. I mean, look on the web. There's a diet for every single problem that is known to man. The issue with this is, like I said, we're chasing symptoms. And that becomes a problem because, number one, we take you out of the equation as a human being. And we eliminate, hey, how did you get here? You know, what was your childhood like? Did you have a lot of trauma? I talked to a lady this morning who was like, you know, I have Hashimoto's and celiac, and I know exactly how I got here. You know, I was adopted. It was a traumatic adoption. I was in and out of foster homes. My adopted parents, blah, 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 blah. Kept going. And then, you know, in college, I had an abusive relationship. You know, it's like, it's been a journey. I forget my whole point and where I was going with this, but we have these restrictive diets and we're not looking at the person and saying, how did we get here? And I'm not saying you need to be an emotional counselor, but you need to know how to work with people to get them out of this state, right? Because you don't have SIBO just because you eat bad food. You don't have Candida just because you eat bad food, right? You don't have adrenal fatigue just because you eat bad food. It's not about food, 100%. Yes, we do nutrition, but we tell everyone this. Your healing process is more than just nutrition, right? You have to look at what got you here. You have to look at how you're living, how you're sleeping, when you go to bed, all these different things to create a better structure, to create a better environment, to reduce that stress response in the system. And no one's teaching that. No one's saying, hey, what's going on? How do you sleep? You know, instead they say, well, you need to take some magnesium glycinate at night. Oh, you have Candida. Well, you know, Candida feed on sugar, so just cut out carbohydrates. It's asinine if you think about it, because when you really dive deeper into these things, you look at really Candida is the result of an immune suppressed state, right? And Candida do feed on sugar. That's how they thrive. They live symbiotically with you. But when we become in this immune suppressed state, or when we starve them, then they become overgrown, just simplified. And of course, if you eat the standard American diet, that can facilitate that, which does contain a lot of sugar, but it's really low in protein. It's high in genetically modified foods and organisms, etc. So, you know, we have to start looking at the person and saying, who are you and how did you get here? That's the most important thing, because if we don't do that, all we're doing is focusing on the effect, meaning the symptoms, the disease, you know, the bacteria, the virus. And what do? We give you a medication. And everyone's like, well, unless the medicine sucks. I'm going to go see a functional medicine doctor. That's great. How are they any different than a doctor? They do labs, they give you supplements. Philosophically, it's exactly the same as a doctor. Doctors do labs and give you medication. So it's not going to really do much to help you. And this is why most people are not getting a result. And they say, I've worked with 10 practitioners. I spent $4,000 or $5,000 and I'm still struggling. I've been doing this for 5 years and I'm still struggling, right? We have to start looking at the cause. Not ignore the effect. It's information to kind of tell you how you got here. We have to start focusing on you, right? I talked to another client today who has fatigue, high blood pressure, and things like that. And we're looking at his logs, we're talking about his day, and his biggest trigger for stress is his work. You know, he eats great throughout the day, his temps and pulses regulate. But his biggest driver for stress is that he can't stop working. He works till like 9 at night, you know? So I said, we started talking about like, what do you feel makes you stressed? And he's like, it's just work, not being able to stop working. I'm like, you just need to set boundaries. And this is just a simple example of the more we change how we're living, of course, he knows his driver is his work. So if he cuts back on work, creates more stability with his food, and creates a better environment for health is going to flourish. I'm not saying it's that easy, but we need to start looking at those things. But here's the problem. We have to get vulnerable. We have to put our ego aside, and we have to do work. And no one wants to do work, right? Because all these diets, let's just stop eating. Let's just fast so we can get healthy. It's probably, in my opinion, the dumbest invention or diet that's been created ever. How do we just say, okay, well, we're human. We need food to produce energy so we can produce who we are and function properly. We're just going to stop eating or cut back the amount we're eating, and that's actually going to heal us. It's going to lead to more dysfunction down the line, right? So we have to start focusing on and looking at how we're living our life, right? As Paul would say, you know, health is taking responsibility for yourself. And we have to change that. And my point in all this with metabolism is, unless you change the state of your body, you're not going to heal no matter what lotion or potion you do or take, or the practitioner you work with. Could be the best practitioner in the world. It doesn't matter. If you hopped on that roller coaster 10 years ago of stress physiologically, and your nervous system is in this chronically stressed state, and your cells are not producing energy, and you're creating oxidative stress, and you're depleted in minerals, and the list goes on, and you take a supplement or you work with the best practitioner and they're not focusing on that piece, quieting that system down to get you off the roller coaster so you can become more anabolic and produce energy in yourself, doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to create sustainable health. So for me, that's where metabolism comes in. And to me, it's really looking at your cells. And a lot of people say, well, that's too complex, or that's, you know, no one's talking about this. But when you really look at your cells and what drives your systems, it is your cells, because you are a conglomeration of cells. You come into this world as a cell and you multiply, right? That's how we are born. You are a conglomeration of cells, and every cell is mitochondria. The average cell has about a couple hundred mitochondria. Your liver cells have about a couple thousand mitochondria. Your heart has 5,000 to 6,000 mitochondria. You know, the cell of an embryo has like, I think, almost 1 million mitochondria. So you can see how important it is to make sure your cells are working properly. And like I said, if your cells are not working properly, you're creating oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is inflammation, it's chronic stress, and it's what leads to high TSH, fat accumulation, low bone mineral density. The list goes on. It's chronic stress. And what's all diseases are results of chronic stress. And this is from the work of Hanselier, who kind of coined the term stress. So for me, focusing on the cell is the most important thing, because they are the conductors to your system or systems.
So I think that we have to go so far back to basics with clients, because when people come to me, and I'm sure they're the same with you, when I ask them to do a food log, no one's ever really asked them to do that before.
Right.
So if we just throw out diets at people, or say, you have Hashimoto's, here's the list of foods that you can't eat, people become, I'm finding, so obsessed with what they can't eat that they're actually become afraid of food and they're not eating. Right. And when I get them to do a food diary, sometimes it's really actually confronting for them. They find it really difficult. But until we actually do one, I can't actually see as a practitioner what they're doing and what decisions they're making. And we can't actually have any aha moments, right, until they've actually done the diary and built an awareness of what they're doing. And what I'm seeing is, and I'm sure, I don't know if it's the same, the logs that you get back, but people just aren't eating enough food for their energy requirements. And there's a lot of accidental fasting going on, and just a misunderstanding of, okay, so I have the list of foods, but how do I eat those foods in the right amounts and the combinations to get what I need to do? Like, people really, I think we have this unconscious culture where it's just better to not eat than to eat. Would you agree with that? It's all sorts
We
of
have
stuff.
a culture that is deathly afraid of getting vulnerable, right? We're taught not to feel at a young age, right? By how our parents communicate with us. If any of you have children, read the book No Bad Kid, right? It's a simple book, but you can learn how you communicate with your children and how it gives them their power, how it sets boundaries, how it shows authority without yelling at your kids, shaming your kids, putting your kids down, right? And just taking their power away, right? And we've been taught this from such a young age, even through government, TV, schooling, etc. We are deathly afraid to feel, right? Because when we do that, we have to go back towards the traumas, right? And we have to feel that. And for a lot of people, it's scary. Same thing with food, right? We don't want to feel, we just want to do. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. The problem is the only way you're going to heal is to feel. And that's the piece. It's like the whole work of Brené Brown, right? You have to step into the arena. You have to get vulnerable. And to me, that's one of the 5 foundational principles that come before anything, whether it's food, emotional work, doesn't matter. You have to believe that you can heal. You have to trust that you can heal, right? You have to realize that it's a process and a journey versus a destination. You have to be willing to get vulnerable, and you have to be able to create consistency, etc. And if you can't do those things, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It's never going to happen. But this is why people have trouble sometimes with our work, because we're asking people to step up to the plate. We're not saying, let's ignore you and just give you something. We're saying, let's focus on you and not give you something to take, right? Let's focus on, okay, when you're eating during the day, how does this work for you? How do you feel? People say, I don't even know how I feel, right? When you look at the 5 levels of pain, numbness being the top level, it says a lot about a person. It tells you a lot about a person, how numb they are, not only to life, but just themselves, right? And when you look at really, if you study the work of Gabor Mate, he talks about like any stress or trauma creates a disconnection from self, right? And that disconnection moves us further from self. And of course, when that happens, we can't feel. If you can't feel and you can't create awareness, you can't make the best decisions for yourself in your life every single day, right? Prime example is, well, I had a stressful day at work. I ate pizza at lunch. I didn't have a breakfast. I ate coffee and I was starving, but I left work at 5 and I did CrossFit. Right? That's not a good decision. If you were aware and you could feel, you would say, I ate like shit today. I didn't eat enough food. I'm probably chronically stressed internally. So going to do the workout is actually taking more money out of my bank account than it's giving me. So it's not a good decision, right? But we put everything else in front of our basic needs, right? So for me, that's an important piece, because the more vulnerable we can get and the more awareness we can create, the better decisions we can make. And that's what health is. It's about making the best decisions possible every day so you can create health. And it's important because when you look at where most people are at, like I mentioned, they're numb. When you look at, another huge piece of our work that ties into metabolism in the cell is the nervous system. Everyone always talks about parasympathetic, sympathetic, stress. I'm in this stress state. The problem is, yes, most people are. But when you really look at, the nervous system, it's actually 3 pieces, the autonomic nervous system. And you can study the work of like Stephen Porges and I forget the other lady's name. But there's the parasympathetic, which is like the rest and digest. That's where everyone wants to be, right? We're relaxed, we're anabolic, we're homeostatic. We're not withdrawing money. We're depositing some money in our energy bank account. We're doing good. That's a piece of the vagus nerve, right? The ventral vagus that regulates kind of the facial muscles in the heart. It's that social engagement. It's being human. It's interacting. It's smiling. It's being happy. That's parasympathetic, right? That's why having friends and engaging is so important for a child's development, right? Because it helps to shape their nervous system, because they're not born with that piece of their nervous system. Then you have that second rung, which is the sympathetic. That's the a mobilization state. That's the fight or flight, running from a lion or getting on a roller coaster, right? Heart rate's elevated, blood pressure's elevated. Things are elevated because we're in a heightened state. We need to, run. We need to move. We need to mobilize. After that, we go into what's the third rung is another piece of the parasympathetic, which is the dorsal vagus, which really is about immobilization, frozen, right? Freezing, that freeze state, that numb state, depression. I don't know how I feel. I don't know what I want, right? People that can't even tune into themselves. And in my opinion, from talking to so many people, right, people are so paralyzed with food right now. They don't know what's right, what to eat, which way to go. People are so paralyzed in their life. They're in this third rung, right? And this is a piece of the nervous system that babies are born with. But babies can't self-regulate. That's why when babies cry, we have to hold them. We have to bounce them, right? Because they're only born with that piece of the dorsal vagus nerve. So we have to nurture them. That's why when your baby's crying, you don't just go, I'm going to sleep train them at 1 year old. It's never going to happen. They can't self-regulate. Through environment and through nurturing them, you actually help them self-regulate. You help the development of the nervous system. So essentially, as one of my mentors always said, like, we're children or babies with adult suits on, and most of us are so locked in to that third rung, we don't even know how to get out of it. And it's not like you go from the first to second to third. Some people have been through so much trauma or so much stress, they go from the first to the third and they just shut down and they become paralyzed. They don't know what to do anymore. And my point in this is the industry is pushing people there, right? We've lost the balance point of health and now we're doing too much. It's almost like we're biohacking. Carbs are bad. We should only eat protein. Go vegan. It's all so extreme. We've lost that balance point, but it's pushing people with chronic stress and trauma deep into that piece of their nervous system. There's a problem with that because we can't self-regulate there. Obviously, it creates chronic stress in the system. We can't produce energy. We're drawing money 24/7 and it doesn't help us heal. We have to do something in our life and we have to create an environment nutritionally that allows us to get out of that state. And when we do that, my whole point in this is we create awareness. It's not that you shouldn't use those states of stress, right? They're there for a reason to help us adapt. So when you do go on a roller coaster, it is stressful, but you can help regulate through it. But through that awareness, we come back to that first rung and we know how to get back there now. And we use our nutrition approach to do that because when you give the body what it needs, you quiet the system down, you pay the bank back, you increase thyroid hormone conversion, and in a nutshell, you increase the amount of mitochondria in the cell through energy production. Mm-hmm. And that keeps your cells going. It feeds the cells through a feedback loop because you produce CO2. That CO2 pulls oxygen out of hemoglobin, gets oxygen in the cell, and just keeps going. We produce more mitochondria. The more mitochondria we produce, the more metabolic we become, the more we can auto-regulate our nervous system, right? So I know I went way off tangent, but this is why people can't log. This is why people can't do this work from the beginning because they can't feel and they don't have the awareness. So this is why, for me, with almost all my clients, we go super slow because we have to meet the body where it's at. Think about if your daughter woke up, which has probably happened, and she's screaming and she's super upset. You don't go in there and be like, right? You have to do the opposite. You have to create an environment to meet her where she's at so she can come down. And that's what you need to do with your nutrition approach. Your lifestyle is say, you know what, I'm in this super chaotic state. What do I need to do to shift it so I can quiet down a little and get the smoke to clear so I can get a clear path? But the only way we could do that is to feel, and it's not easy. Mm-hmm. Focusing on macros pushes you from that. Using an Oura ring pushes you from that. Using technology and devices pushes you away from feeling, right? All these diets push you away from feeling. They're so extreme because it locks you into focusing on your symptoms. The problem is the symptoms are the result of the state of your body. Unless you change that state, you get off the roller coaster, nothing's going to happen.
It's huge. So where do we start with food? Let's get to the basics with people, because I think when you talk about the bank account, we are all massively debiting our accounts and not paying it back.
Right.
So how do we get, using nutrition, get back to a zero balance point and make regular deposits?
Yeah, for me, people are depleted in many areas. Our buckets are empty. From minerals, when you look at what's in our environment that depletes minerals, just to be simple, it's stress depletes tons of minerals, especially magnesium, synthetic vitamin C, calcium, zinc, vitamin D, all these supplements, throw them in the trash, they deplete specific minerals, especially copper. And copper is so important for our cells to produce energy. We look at high fructose corn syrup. We look at genetically modified foods like Roundup. We look at Tylenol. We look at all these different things that deplete minerals. And the problem is minerals produce vitamins. And then we look at a larger piece of it. We're so depleted from an energy state because our entire life we've lived beyond our means and we haven't met our metabolic needs, right? So essentially, a stress is when the demands being placed on the system exceed what the system can handle. And that's where most of us are at. So the question is, where do we start? It's really simple. Just start eating food. Because most people want to fast, but they're already fasting. They're eating once a day, 2 times a day, 3 times a day. Why? Because they're afraid of gaining weight, right? You don't gain weight because you eat too much food. You're gaining weight because of the state of your system, right? Dysfunctional physiology, imbalance in hormones, the list goes on. So for me, with a lot of clients, we do work with people very personalized. But when you look at just the foundation to me is just start eating metabolic foods and creating balance with them throughout the day. You're not going to be where you need to be after the first week, second week, etc. But as long as you keep working on it, you'll get there. So when we say metabolic foods, we're talking about things like tropical fruits that are ripe, right? Pretty much any fruit that's ripe. We're talking about root vegetables that are overcooked. We're talking about squashes that are cooked. We're talking about shellfish and whitefish and dairy, eggs and broth and collagen and muscle meats and organ meats. To me, those are metabolic foods. Why? Simplified. What's in them? The minerals, the nutrients, the vitamins that feed our body. It's about what our body needs. So you go fill your car up with gas, you go, I have a diesel engine. I need to put in diesel fuel. Or, my weed whacker is 2 strokes. You got to mix the oil and gas together to feed it exactly what it needs. Because what happens if you just put gas in? It's going to break. Same thing with the human body, right? So for me, we have to look at those metabolic foods and say, this is what the body thrives on. Now, this is not the only foods people eat, but these are metabolic foods. And it's about using them throughout the day and making sure that, you get a carb and a protein at each meal or snack, that you're waking up and you're eating within 30 to 60 minutes to nourish the system after fasting all night, right? And eating throughout the day to fuel your needs, to make sure that you meet your metabolic needs so the demands being placed in the system don't exceed what the system can handle, right? It's about having enough gas in the tank to meet the demands of your day with your kids or at work or working out or whatever you're doing. Because when you don't, you dip into those reserves, you release those stress hormones, and now you're creating oxidative stress at the cell level. So for me, it's just starting with those metabolic foods, and making sure that you're getting a carb and a protein at each meal throughout the day, that you're waking up, eating within 30 to 60 minutes, and then from there, eat when you feel you need to eat. And for some people, they're only eating 2 meals a day. So maybe you say, I'm going to get 3 for the next few weeks or 4 weeks or 5 weeks. Doesn't always have to be 6 meals. That could take you a year to get there. It could take you a year to get to 5 meals. But I think it's just starting with the basics to start changing your environment. And it's not going to happen overnight because the approach is not about chasing symptoms anymore. It's about unwinding the state of your nervous system, unwinding the oxidative stress at the cell level that's been going on for the past 20, 30, 40 years. So give yourself a year, right, to really heal and go through all that stuff, go through the bullshit, go through the ups and downs, come out on the other side. Because healing is not a 30-day program. It's just not going to happen. And if anyone tells you that, they're blowing smoke up your butt, and you need to run, because there's no way anyone's going to heal any type of chronic dysfunction in that short amount of time. If you truly want to heal, you got to put in the work. You're going to get the results, but you have to start with those basics, because as humans, we're not meeting our basic human needs. We're just not doing it, right? Look at the restrictive diets. Cut out the carbs, right? Only eat protein, low carb diets, fasting. Here's the GI diet. Here's the AIP diet. Here's the Candida diet. Look at all those diets. All you're doing is cutting out food. We're not about that. We're about focusing on what the body needs and trying to create balance. How do we find that balance point again with health so it becomes part of our life and not an obsession?
Let's talk about, I really want to talk about breakfast and eating. And you've said it a few times, eating within 30 minutes to 60 minutes of getting up. And I feel like this is the biggest problem with my clients, because we've all got this idea that we should train fasted, or we just go, I've got to get to the gym, I'm not going to eat before. And it's this rush in the morning. And I think what people are not realizing is that this rush in the morning is, for a lot of people, the most stressful part of the day. Like for me, I feel like it's the most stressful part of the day. I've got everyone in the house organized, And when I sit down at my desk to do my work, that's when I'm calm all of a sudden, because it's just about me.
Right.
But so many parents, and there are other people, are not actually eating till lunchtime or midday. Can we just talk about why it's so important to eat within 30 minutes of getting up? This is a huge problem, I think.
Part of our work is based on science, and part of it is just working with people for 20 years and seeing what works for people. I think the first thing is you have to realize we've been fasting for 6, 7, 8 hours at night. If I said to you, hey, you can, when you wake up, you can't eat for the next 6 hours, how would you feel? Starving, right? We've been fasting. We need to fill up the tank. And the other issue is most people's tanks are empty. So throughout the night, they're going into that stress response. And that's why most people have sleep issues. And they have to take some type of sleep supplement or sleep medication. So when you get up, now we use body temperature and pulse, and of course, how people feel to really get a gauge. When they get up, laying down, what is their temp and pulse? This tells us, in a sense, how their body is using food to produce energy at the cell level. And I'm simplifying it. How the cells are using thyroid hormone to produce energy. And you'll see that in your temp and pulse. Normal temp and pulse is like 97.8, 98.6 Fahrenheit and 36.5 to 37 Celsius. Your pulse should be 70 to 85 at rest, right? I said 70 to 85 at rest. So the problem is people are waking up in a hypothermic state. They have a super low temperature, super low pulse. That means our body is in a stress state. It kind of shows us where our nervous system is, right? It shows us, if you wake up with a low body temperature and a low pulse, it shows us that your nervous system is in that third rung. It's in that frozen state. A lot of people that wake up with like a normal temperature, a low temperature, a super high pulse, like 90, 100, they're in that sympathetic state, right? They're in that second rung. They're in that stress state. And the only thing that's going to get us out of that is food. We're human. It's a basic need. I mean, beside being heard, held, acknowledged, and responded to appropriately as a basic human need, we need food and water. Without it, we die. It's that simple. And we use food to produce energy. Without energy, we eat ourselves to make energy, in a nutshell, right? And that's catabolic. That creates oxidative stress. That you might feel good now. Trust me. Oh, I feel great. Fasting's great. Keto's great. The list goes on. But you're sacrificing long-term health for short-term gain, right? And you're going to be the person that turns 40 or 50 is like, I have arthritis. I have degenerative disc disease. I have osteoporosis. I have Hashimoto's, right? Because you sacrifice that. So breakfast is so important because we look at where we're at and we have that breakfast, and this doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time with consistency. It allows us to fill the tanks back up so we can get our cells going again, right? So we can produce energy and push us back into that metabolic state. So for me, breakfast is super important. Most people wake up, they don't have an appetite, right? Or they need to take thyroid medication. So you wait 30 minutes and then you eat. That's fine. You can always wake up and have a collagen smoothie, with some frozen fruit and coconut water and collagen. You can have broth and fruit. Of course, you can have something bigger like eggs and fruit and potatoes, whatever, but you just need to get something in your system, right? And of course, if you wake up and you had, let's say, bone broth and some cooked apples, that's not super dense. It's not a lot of food. You're talking maybe 100 to 200 calories, if that. So that type of meal, yes, you're waking up and having that, and that's beautiful. You should be eating probably within 2 hours after that, a meal. For the people that wake up and have, let's say, eggs and potatoes and fruit or whatever, it's denser. You're putting more logs in the fire. It's going to last you longer. You probably can go to 3, maybe 4 hour mark before eating again. But it's all based on how you feel, looking at your logs, your pulse and temp, and really finding what works for your system. Mm-hmm. So I would say this, for most of you, take your body temperature and pulse when you wake up in the morning, laying down. That's your baseline. And then when you are done eating breakfast, wait 20 minutes and then take it again seated. And it'll show you, hey, my breakfast worked for me or it didn't. Or my morning routine worked for me or it didn't. So if you wake up at, let's say, a low temperature and you eat and your temp goes up, you're on the right track. A, with the food, but A, with your frequency of when you ate when you woke up, and then your morning routine. If your temperature actually dropped after that first meal, that what you ate and when you ate and what you do in the morning is not supporting you. And like Leila said, it's the morning routine is so important because it sets the stage for the day. How many people... Most people are exhausted. Why? Because they go, do. So if you start the day like that, you automatically push your nervous system deep into that sympathetic state right from the get-go. Most people should wake up, spend 5 minutes just laying in bed and nose breathing, and then have some type of morning routine. Don't go for the phone. Don't go for the TV. Don't go for the coffee. Maybe you just sit quietly. Maybe you read. Get your meal together, eat your meal, and then you can slowly ease into your day. And it's challenging because a lot of us have kids and jobs, then you need to wake up earlier and you go to bed later. So you do have the time, right? Because health is about creating space for health to happen. If you don't create the space for health to happen, it's not going to happen, right? If you don't create change in your life for health, you're not going to create any change and get healthier. So you have to take baby steps, but if you're just waking up and going, you're going to be chasing your energy, your physiology, your stress hormones, your blood sugar all day. And this is why most people have trouble sleeping. It's that simple.
I think it's why a lot of people have so much trouble with anxiety as well, right? It's that constant adrenaline rush, and then I find clients have trouble just making grounded decisions, good decisions for themselves because they're so wired from this state of not having any food, but we still think that eating less is better than eating too much.
Right.
Because I feel like the state of stress we're in, we should almost eat too much more than we think we should.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have anxiety, because A, they're not producing energy at the cell level, number one. So we become, in a sense, carbon dioxide deficient, right? We have a low tolerance for CO2. And the problem is with CO2, our body uses CO2 to grab oxygen off hemoglobin. So the more CO2 we produce, and this is why people that can hold their breath for a long time, like 5 minutes or something like that, they have a high tolerance for CO2. And they're producing it and using it to grab that oxygen and get into the cell. The problem people hyperventilate is, yes, they're in a stress state, number one, and they're not producing enough oxygen at the cell level. So when you do that, you can't auto-regulate the nervous system and increases that sympathetic state. Anytime we go in that sympathetic state, we're going to mouth breathe. Think about it. If I said to you, I want you to go sprint a mile, right? That's going to push you into the sympathetic state. But the bottom line is we need that sympathetic state to help us adapt. Would you be nose breathing or mouth breathing? You'd be mouth breathing. Why? Because you went into fifth gear, and that's okay. That should happen. But think about it all the time if your body's in fifth gear, right? And you're running a mile physiologically at rest and you're mouth breathing, you're expelling buttloads of CO2. So you're decreasing your CO2 tolerance and your body's ability to grab onto oxygen. And if you study the work of even Wim Hof, the Buteyko method, Brian McKenzie, there's so many others, but you study their work, you just study physiology, it'll talk about how anytime CO2 levels drop that much, it's going to stimulate, or when we hyperventilate that much, it's going to stimulate anxiety, right? Because of that low CO2 level. So in my opinion, it's not that anxiety causes hyperventilation. It's hyperventilation causes anxiety from being in a stress state, from mouth breathing and not nose breathing.
And I'm not even talking about, the kind of anxiety where you need to go and see, get therapy on a regular basis or take medication. I'm just talking about the anxiety where something happens in the day and it totally derails your day. But it's, you know what I mean? There's some people that just can't handle
just a low resiliency.
So things make them panic, and, just having a conversation with someone makes them panic, or just, an email coming in makes them panic. And I find that a lot of those people are massively under eating and just unable to deal with the stress of life. You're going into work with no fuel in the tank.
Well, the same thing. If you're under eating and not meeting your metabolic needs, of course, you're not producing energy. So you can't grab that oxygen and you're automatically going to hyperventilate, At the same time, when we don't eat enough, of course, the demands being placed on the system exceed what the system can handle, right? It's about checks and balances. Now we're withdrawing more money than we actually have. And just to simplify that will stimulate that stress response. Our body is designed to adapt, right? So we don't die. It's important. But that's why hypertension, high cholesterol, all these things are diseases of adaptation. It's not that there's anything wrong with you, just how you're living is beyond what your body can handle. So when you don't eat enough, yes, your body goes into that stress state, which of course can create that kind of wound up, kind of jittery state. I can't fall asleep, or I fall asleep and wake up at night, or I don't wake up rested, et cetera, et cetera. I would say for me, so many people have sleep issues because of this, right? Because of how they're living and not eating during the day. It's not supporting that environment for sleep. Why? Because they're going to bed and they're laying down, but physiologically, their body's in fifth gear and running that mile in their mouth breathing, right? So for me, food is important because food is energy, right? And it's challenging because the question is, there's so many diets. What do I eat? When do I eat? Should I fast? Should I not? Et cetera, et cetera. We don't focus on any of those diets, like I mentioned, because it's not about you. It's a cookie cutter way of eating. And unfortunately, we all have different lives, with different histories, different traumas, and different needs. And to me, they don't look at that. And that's the biggest problem with that entire arena. So for me, for a lot of people, it's just about eating more. I'm not saying it's that simple, but most people, like I said, are exceeding. They're putting out so much energy and going, but they just don't have the energy in the tank to support that.
I think it could be important to talk about calories here, because I think we moved away from calories because it was like counting calories and making sure you were eating as little calories as possible. Whereas now, from working with you and when I work with clients, what I get people to do calories is they have this huge awakening that's like, I don't actually eat enough food, right? So it can actually be super important to count your calories, to look at, are you getting enough food, right? Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, we have people look at the calories usually in phase 3 of our 4-phase approach, because we want to create that foundation first. That foundation with metabolic foods and creating balance and how much they need to eat and when they need to eat, and really getting comfortable with that and laying that foundation to quiet the system down and get the engine going again. And then we get a baseline and look at their calories. And I'd say in 20 years, 95% of the people that when they start logging there's three things that are happening. They're under eating, they're overeating fat, and under eating protein. Super common. And it's not that carbs are better than protein and protein's better than carbs and none of that, right? We need all of them. There's no mistake that our body produces digestive enzymes to break down protein, right? So when people say we don't need protein, animal protein, if you can't argue with physiology. It's there, right? We produce hydrochloric acid for a reason. It's a huge part of our immune system, but it also breaks down protein. Same thing with carbs. We release enzymes to break down carbs. So we need all of them, and it's finding that balance. That takes a little bit of time, but most people are under eating, not even just frequently throughout the day, but just in general, they under eat. I started working with a lady the other day, and she has Hashimoto's, and she eats 2 meals a day, and she's concerned that she's overeating, right? And this is another big issue because what drives most people's health? Weight loss. Everyone wants, doesn't matter if their arm is falling off, doesn't matter if their insides are falling out, doesn't matter if a guy can't even get an erection. The bottom line is, I want to lose weight. That's the most important thing, and that's what drives people's decisions. We have to move away from that because weight loss is not a sign of health, right? Weight gain is a sign of chronic stress and inflammation. And we have to quiet that down in order for weight loss to happen. It's like, what was it? Diana Schwartzbein said, you have to get healthy to lose weight, not lose weight to get healthy. That old, quote. But for me, it's number one, you have to go slow with the food because if you go too fast, yes, you will gain weight. But overall, people just don't eat enough or enough throughout the day periodically to put the fuel in the tank. And the example I always use is this. If you were staying in a cabin in Alaska and there was a wood-burning stove, right? Think of that wood-burning stove like your metabolism or your cells producing energy, which is heat, right? So if you woke up in the morning and it's like minus 10 degrees out Fahrenheit, which is super cold, and if it's in Celsius, just think of like the coldest day ever, because I don't know Celsius. And you woke up, what would you want to do? You'd want to put some logs in the fire to get the fire going, increase the heat in the house, right? So you can get this nice burn, this nice fire, and get the temp in the house up to 70 degrees, right? But if you were like, well, I did my job, I'm producing heat, that's it. That's equivalent to like how most people eat. What's going to happen throughout the day? The temperature in the house is going to drop. The fire is going to go out, and then you're going to have a cold house again. You're going to be super uncomfortable. This is how most people eat during the day. They're throwing logs on their fire, or mostly twigs or sometimes paper, on their wood-burning stove, once or twice or 3 times a day. That's not going to get you through a 24-hour period when it's minus 10 degrees outside. So you have to think about making sure that you put on those logs throughout the day in a strategic way to fuel the system so you have an efficient temperature, efficient fire, that's getting you to that 3-hour mark, sometimes 4-hour mark, and you can produce that heat efficiently so you have this nice, comfortable house and so you can sleep, right? And that's the example I use with clients, and this is why most people feel the way they feel, because they've dieted, they've restricted foods, they're afraid of gaining weight, and they just don't eat enough throughout the day to meet the demands being placed in their system. So for a lot of people, I'd say, yeah, you need to add another meal, if not 2 meals, or beef up your meals or eat breakfast sooner so you can fit in your food throughout the day.
I'm also seeing a lot of men undereating, which actually surprises me. I
think most people undereat. If you look at the state of our society, we're overdoing and undernourishing. That's the bottom line. And this is why so many people have so many chronic diseases, right? When you look at SIBO, when you look at what stress does to the digestive system, it slows down our digestive juices, right? Why? Because we're running from a lion. The body's not thinking, oh, I want to eat food. Because if you think about that and you stop to eat food, you're going to become food. So all your energy is diverted to your muscles so you can run, so you can move, so you can think, so you can see where you're going and you're alert. It's naturally that your digestive juices drop. right? The issue is, of course, everyone's in that state all the time, right? And that's a big problem in itself. I figure my whole point with this.
I think that people are not getting hungry, right? And it's almost like a pride thing, like, oh, I don't get hungry, or I could do this, it lasts me all day and I don't have to eat all day. It's almost like a badge of honor, isn't it? Or it's a sale point of a smoothie. It's like, this smoothie is so good, it'll fill you up and you don't have to eat all day.
Right.
I mean, that's just not possible.
No, people are super lost with nutrition. And, of course, social media doesn't help. Even with me, when we post Instagram posts, people want to know the answer to heal in one post. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. If you think it's going to happen, it could be the reason why you've been struggling for 5 years, because you're looking at all the wrong places. We just have to get back to the basics and nourish ourselves. Make sure we're getting the right foods. Make sure we're getting enough of the right foods. Make sure we're not living beyond our means and going all the time. Make sure we're creating space for healing. Make sure we have me time. When we're doing all these things slowly over time to create the environment for health. And it's that simple. If you create the environment for health, it'll flourish, because that's all the body wants to do. But if you don't create that environment, it's just not going to happen.
I think another big myth is people, so there's the breakfast myth, but then there's the people getting really tired at 3 or 4 in the afternoon.
Right. And that's usually blood sugar, whether they woke up and had coffee before they had breakfast. Should always eat breakfast, then have coffee. It could be they're not eating enough throughout the day. It could be their food frequency is off. They're waiting 5 or 6 hours between meals, right? And it's really showing them that, hey, your day requires a lot of energy. Your day is stressful, right? Which is not a bad thing. It's more of a stress because you're not meeting those demands with fuel. And if you did wake up and have your breakfast and then have your coffee and ate periodically throughout the day to meet those demands of stress, you probably wouldn't be falling asleep at the end of the day.
And I think we've gone off track with that as well, right? Because people have associated that, well, that's when you have sugar cravings, so you should not eat sugar at that time in the afternoon, and looking at that rather than the whole picture is, did you fuel yourself enough to get to that point of the day? I mean, I've got clients that say like, oh, well, I get tired at 3 in the afternoon, so I go and do a workout.
That's the worst thing you could do. Cravings are a sign that you're not regulating your blood sugar. You got to listen to your body.
Yeah.
You haven't created stability throughout the day. You haven't got the liver to store glycogen. And that's why you're having cravings. Your body's saying, give me a meal. Give me some proteins and carbs and fat so I can really regulate my physiology. I don't mean eat chocolate or ice cream. I mean, eat a meal.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's challenging for people because it doesn't matter how sick they are or how dysfunctional they are. Usually their number one goal is to lose weight. And people have to really step up to the plate and say, I'm going to put that aside.
Yeah.
Right.
And even
I want to get healthy first.
The thin people are afraid of putting on weight. So for all the people who are like, but I'm not worried I'm not trying to lose weight. I see a lot of people who are actually, their whole philosophy is to not put on weight as well. They're afraid.
Right. And that usually sabotages the process. Because every decision they make is so they don't overeat and gain weight. And the problem is they probably need to eat more. Right. And you can see that not everyone gains weight because they eat too much. There's a lot of, people that don't eat that much and still gain a lot of weight. Remember, it's not about the food all the time. It's about our physiology and the state of our physiology. The longer, when you go into that stress state, your immune system becomes hyper vigilant and active. And then over time, if you're in chronic stress, it goes down. Right. So when you look at the evolution of stress, fat accumulation is a result of chronic stress because the hormones that are being constantly produced. Right. And that's why a lot of people start to get bellies or the spare tire and stuff like that. Yes, it has to do what they eat and when they eat, but also on top of that, it has to do with the chronic stress they've been under for a certain amount of time or trauma that they've been under for a certain amount of time.
And everyone's different, right? Some people put on weight when they're stressed. Some people lose weight. But I think the key thing is that some people have put on weight because they've been in the stressed state so long
Exactly.
It happened years and years and years ago that I got into stress, and now the body is really in that state of inflammation. But let's talk about hunger, because so many people that come to me, I'm sure come to you, they have no appetite, like you were talking about before.
Yeah.
How do we know that we're hungry if we're not feeling the classic hunger? Because I think this is what people really need to connect with, right? And I find some people are not, for some reason, they're not ready to do body temperature and pulse.
When I first started to study Dr. Timmons' work, he was the guy who created Biohealth Diagnostics. It's a lab. I don't even know if it's still around anymore, but he passed away a while ago. And he used to always say, the first sign of stress in someone's body is lack of appetite, right? Like I said, you're running from that lion. You're not thinking about having sex. Same thing, hormonal fertility. If you're running from a lion, you're not like, hey, I want to have sex right now. You're running from a lion. You don't want to procreate. Everything's diverted. And this is why a lot of people have, stress hormone problems. So that lack of appetite is another sign that your body is stressed. But this is a problem because you're not hungry. So if you don't eat, you're just going to perpetuate the state that you're in, that wound up stress state. You're on that roller coaster. You're running from a lion. So you have to go really slow. And these are the people that when they wake up, we say, don't even worry about your temp and pulse. Just within 30 minutes or so, wake up, have something light. Like I mentioned, it could be a cup of bone broth with some cooked fruit, half a cooked apple. It could be a collagen smoothie with frozen fruit and coconut water. It could be one egg with a quarter piece of fruit. I mean, just something small to get something into the system to begin moving towards where you need to go. And then usually within 90 minutes, they're going to need to eat again. These people will have to eat smaller meals more periodically. And then throughout the day, what happens is they usually say, well, I don't have an appetite till noon. And then the more consistent they are with eating these small meals and chipping the rust off their cells and getting their cells to produce energy, what happens is they say, now I'm actually hungry at 11. And they keep doing it, and then they get hungry, and they start getting hungry at 10, and it keeps moving their way back until they wake up with an appetite, and they can start having a meal versus this little snack. But that lack of appetite is from being in a chronically stressed state, 100%.
Do you have, I don't know whether it's safe to talk about sort of guidelines, but I think most people have this confusion with, if you want to be a person that works, has this great career and works really hard within your work hours and trains because you love training and has this full and happy life, how much do you need to eat? Like when a person is healthy, and I find this really helpful when I talk about this with clients, like any of the male athletes that I've worked with, for instance, when I explain it to my guys that are only eating like 1,700 calories, but and people forget they're actually like athletes, right? They're still training 2 hours a day. Right. You don't need to train that long. You're working all day. You're going all day. Like you're akin to an athlete, really, working at that such high level. And I would say that none of my male athletes that I've ever worked with ate less than 2,500 calories, right?
Right.
How do we shift people back into this mindset? You're actually like an athlete and you need to fuel yourself constantly like an athlete does. You need to recover like an athlete does. You need to, how do we shift people? Would you agree that's kind of the mindset that we need to be in, and how do we shift?
Yeah, I think it takes time, but I think it's deeper than food. I think it's people saying, okay, I have been taught through the experience of watching my parents interact, from, being a mama's boy, the list goes on, to stop being codependent, right? And when we do that, we stop putting everyone else's needs and everything in our world in front of us, and now we put us first. And for me, that's so important. Even as a parent, you come first. Everyone says, well, my child comes first. No, that's not true. You come first, because you can only care for your child. You can only love your child to the degree that you take care of yourself and love yourself.
100%.
Like, you are the soil. So if you are growing a tree, or a bush or tomatoes and it doesn't grow, you're like, these seeds suck. They were bad. No, you look at the soil and you look at the environment. Was the soil right? What is this plant? Does it need it's special soil? Do I need to put coffee grinds in the soil because it needs to be, forget acidic or alkalinic, whatever it may be. It's about environment. Is this plant need to be in the shade and got too much sun? It's all about environment, right? So when people say I am number one, that's when people are going to start healing and focusing on what they need and get what they need throughout the day. And that's going to change from I need to diet or I can't eat enough because I'm going. I don't have enough time because I have kids. I work so much. I hear the same things all the time. Really what you're saying is everything in my life is more important than I am. And unfortunately, that's not true. This is ages ago. 2012 maybe. Paul created a program. I don't even know if it's still around, the PPS program.
Oh, yeah, I think it is.
Yeah. This was like the first time he ever launched it, like the first program. Mm-hmm. And I was in it. And he used this model called the I, we, all model.
Yeah.
Like I, we, all. And it's always something I talk about with clients because I think it shows and explains a lot. If you think of the I as like the soil, right? Whether your I is like when you go to sleep, what food you need, your me time, what are your hobbies, what make you smile, what makes you resource. All those things pull you back up to that piece of that nervous system, social engagement. That's health. That invigorates you. That energizes you. That puts money back in your bank account. That resources you and grounds you. That's important, right? And there's so many different I's. That's going to dictate the trunk, which is the we. That's going to dictate healthy relationships with friends, a relationship with your partner, relationship with your child, relationship with a business partner, right? The we. And it's going to help you set boundaries. It's not just about relationship. There's a lot in there. So the healthier your I, the healthier your we, the healthier the all, which is the branches and the leaves. The all is your family. It's your business. It's everything in between. Right? So you can't have a healthy family or a healthy business unless you have a healthy I. So until people say I'm the most important thing, people are always not going to eat enough. People are always going to say, I'm too busy at work. I need to feed my kids first. I just pick from their plate, whatever it may be, right? So I think that's a huge important piece for people to really think about, that you're the most important thing and you're the only one that can take care of you. So why not? And we've been taught to be so codependent that everything we do and every decision we make is about making someone else happy. And we need to take a step back and say, am I really happy? And I ask a lot of clients that, and I'm like, I really like where I live, or, A, B, C, and D. How do you expect to heal if you're not happy? You can eat all the food you want, but if you're not happy in your marriage, if you're not happy where you live, right? If you're not happy with the process you're doing, the nutrition process, you're not going to heal. That's the bottom line. So it's all about finding what makes your I tick. And when you do that, everything else will fall into place. It's that simple.
I think it's a lot about, too, I was talking about this with a client the other morning, is that most of us have unresolved trauma because our parents are just normal people. They're not perfect and they have their own trauma. And so a lot of us feel that we have gaps in the way we were parented. And the important part is the process of that trauma is to be able to hold yourself in that space and parent yourself in that space rather than waiting for someone else to do it for you. And I was talking about it with a client the other morning who really has trouble just eating something first thing in the morning. And we were talking about how she had some trauma with her mother, and she'd gone to a healer and was doing that and working on that process. And I was like, okay, well, now that we know that's the trauma, the next phase of the healing is to take over your mother's role and say, well, I'm going to parent myself now. And what do you know about babies? Normally babies cry. When the baby cries in the morning, the first thing you do is feed it.
Right.
So this is the place we need to get to with you. And that really actually worked for her, was understanding that feeding yourself is what a parent would do to a baby. And if we're going to parent ourselves properly, we need to feed ourselves as soon as we wake up.
I always use an example. We are no different than a baby. Babies need to eat food every often. They need to poop. They need to go to the bathroom. They need to get their clothes changed. And what do? They play. You create environments they're happy and resourced. We are no different than a baby. No different. The problem is we've got so thrown off course with diets, with religion, with how we saw our parents raise us, friend influence, social media. We get so thrown off track, right? And that's why I said we're adults, we're children with adult suits on, But yeah, I agree. A lot of people have come from this traumatic place, whether it's that trauma or even worse. And it's something I've said for the longest time, and this goes back to we're all addicts, if you think about it,
Totally.
It's not the food that's the problem. It's all the behaviors and the patterns and everything in between that we have to really work on. Because if we can change our behavior and create healthy behaviors, if we can change our habits and create healthy habits, the food piece is going to be really easy. It's just going to support that because the foundation's there, right? Same thing. It's same thing with an addict. You can't just pull away the drug and say, you're healed. What do you have to do? They have to learn in a healthy environment, new behaviors and new healthy habits. It's the same thing with food. It's the same thing with health, but no one's talking about that. And that's why with our clients, we actually talk about a lot of this stuff and say, how are we going to do today different? Right? What's tomorrow like? How are we going to do that different? Because unless we focus on all these different pieces of your day, whether it's work, whether it's how what you do first thing in the morning with your kids, whether you wake up and go, whether you overtrain, unless you change all that, the food's only going to do too much. And that's why, I've heard this story a million times. I've worked with this person and this person and this person and this person and this person, and I spent $20,000 and I've got no result. Right? Because no one's really asking them to change. They're just adding more to their plate that's already overflowing.
Well, yeah, and I think, we have to, it's hopefully more people can find someone like you and other practitioners that are actually willing to listen and treat the person, right, rather than the disease, because I can't even tell you how many people I've seen myself, having had Hashimoto's, and there's functional medicine doctors, whatever doctors, always have a diet or a fasting thing or something. Well, if you really want to lose the weight, then that's what you should do. And it's only because of my experience and my, qualifications that I've got the discernment to be able to walk away and go, well, that actually doesn't sound right for me. I don't want to lose weight. I want to get healthy. And so I think the first thing everyone has to do is have patience with the fact that and forgive themselves and love themselves enough to say, the industry really isn't geared up to sit with someone and to sit with that person and the disease, rather than,
right.
I hope everyone listening to that isn't like, oh my God, I threw so much money away seeing all these practitioners. Unless someone actually sits with you like what Josh is talking about and looks at your trauma and the way you're living your life and your day-to-day, you're never going to get healthy.
It's not easy. It's not easy at all. I have 100% complete understanding and compassion for all my clients. It's definitely not easy to create awareness and to change and to make the shifts. And of course, based on human nature, a lot of us take it personal. Like I'm doing this wrong or I'm not doing this right. It's really not about that, because that's what every diet has taught you. So you're ingrained to hear that no matter what someone says to you. But it's definitely not an easy process. But if you sit down and you begin to just listen to what your body needs, when do I need to go to bed? When should I wake up? When do I need to eat throughout the day? And you put yourself first. In the end, through creating that awareness, you're going to be able to flourish. It's really, I'll be honest with you, it's not complex. Healing is not complex. We just make it complex.
Mm.
We get in our own way every single day because we want to do a lab. I did the blah, blah, blah lab. Or I bought how many times I hear, like, oh, I take probiotics. What do you think? I don't like them. Well, I bought the best one. It was from Thailand and it's whatever. And it cost me like $90. And, we want to be like, well, I have an Oura ring and I'm doing this program. I got that book. And, it's just, unfortunately, all those things just push you away from yourself. And really, it just comes down to the basics. And if we stop getting in our own way and we stop moving further from self and we just focus, what do I need every day? Like, do I really need these fancy devices? Do I need to be sitting in front of a red light while I do a podcast for 30 minutes or 80 minutes or 90 minutes? Or do I need to be like doing everything every day that's in the toolbox? No. Because if you're doing everything, you're pushing past that balance point. It's about finding what you need every day to thrive. And most people don't need a lot. Why? Because they're already in a chaotic state. Start simple, go slow. It's honestly that simple. It's going to take time. I'm just saying, to finally get on that path, it's that simple. We just make it so complex, because we're taught that through every practitioner we work with.
And then it becomes so stressful, right? Like, I've got clients that are like spending hours on the weekend making kombucha and sitting in front of their red light and, doing all this stuff. There's so much doing. There's no being left.
It's the same thing as going. It's the same thing with the nervous system. It's like, is red light therapy great? Sure it is. I've been using red light therapy since 2000, before everyone sold it. We still have the same one in Jeanne's office. It's a chicken light with a red light that she can clip to her computer. It's not $150, $500 lamp. It's absolutely asinine. And we would use it with people that lived in climates that were super cold and they didn't get a lot of sun in the winter. That was it, because the bottom line is this. You're effing human. Get outside. Don't be lazy and sit in front of your red lamp. Get outside.
Yeah.
It's that simple. The problem is we want to use these devices because we think, oh, it's going to heal me and everyone needs them. If you strip all that away, you're still going to be dysfunctional, and you see how much it really doesn't help you. It's like I always say about people that biohack, which is the craziest, I don't even know what the philosophy in the world. If you took everything they did away, all those different crazy things they did, they'd be left with nothing and they wouldn't be healthy. So it shows you how much that doesn't work on a physical level, physiological, and an emotional level, right? They can't go to bed at night unless they sleep on a special mattress with a cooling blanket with blue blocker glasses and a red light on. It's
wild music.
Yeah, just keep it simple. Start with the basics. Put all that stuff to the side, and then at the right time, if you need a specific tool, or you need a specific supplement, then you add it in. It's more strategic. And that's what our approach is about. It's all about strategy. It's all about you. It's all about strategy. So every decision we make and every move we make is based on your needs. And
then, it's looking at too, is that driving us into more dysfunction where we actually can't 100%. Enjoy things in life? People get so worked up about having a pizza, on the weekend with my buddies. And it's like, now I have to go and do extra red light therapy. I have to go and run on the treadmill. I have to do this because I ate a pizza. And you're like, pizza's really delicious and it's fun because you hung out with your mates. Like, that's actually healthy. It's not the pizza, it's you.
Right. Yeah, so this is the thing I said, that balance point. We've lost that balance point. We're so OCD now with our health. We're trying to teach people to find that balance point, because I want people to say, I had a drink, I was social, I went out for pizza and I had a piece or two, or I had a gluten-free pizza, I had a treat. And you can find a way to interweave these things into your weekly or monthly routine so you still feel human. And that, to me, is what health is. Health is not about doing more. It's about finding balance so it's a part of your life and it doesn't create an obsession in your life. Because when you do that, the journey of health has now become unhealthy. And that's where most people are at, because they're afraid to eat fruit because it's going to cause diabetes. They're afraid to eat pizza, or when they do, they have to work out 10 times more to burn it off. And that's where most people's heads are at. It's in that obsessive state. But if we, if you think about it, if you think of like a speedometer and you're living at 80 to 90%, and you're putting fuel in your tank and you're making positive decisions and you're thinking great, and you have me time, and you're able to build your I right? You're closer to health, which is 100%, which is not where we want to be. It's too OCD, but you're closer there. So if you have that piece of pizza, or you have that drink occasionally, or have that treat, you have so much resiliency and adaptability that you're not going to feel it because disease and symptoms are over here. But if you're living at 40 to 60% or 50%, and you do have that stuff, you're going to feel it. Why? Because you don't have that resiliency and adaptability built up. So we're really trying to get people away from that way of thinking and towards finding that balance point. I have clients ask me that all the time. Can I have a cake? Is it bad? Can I have chocolate? Is it bad? Can I have a drink? Is it bad? It was my birthday the other day and I had some cake and beer. It's so bad. Nothing is bad. Nothing is wrong with you and nothing is bad, right? When you think in that term, right, you're going to be living in this kind of restrictive world, right? And you're always looking at what's wrong with you. Focus on what's right with you and realize there's nothing wrong with you. And focus on what you can eat and how to create balance with everything else, right? So you can have that cake. Might there be some repercussions? Sure. It's not going to kill you. The stress of stressing over eating the cake is actually physiologically worse for you than eating the cake.
I know, right? I actually had a piece of cake last night and half a glass of wine because we had some friends over. And it was celebratory for me because I was able to get up at 5:30 and do this podcast with you without any repercussions. Does that mean I'm going to go and have cake and wine every day? No, I just know that every once in a while, for the state of health that I'm in right now, I can deal with a piece of cake that was laden with white sugar that I would normally not be able to tolerate before, and half a glass of wine that I would normally not be able to tolerate before. I know that I can now tolerate that in the state of health that I'm in sometime. And my goal would be to get healthier, to be able to tolerate that every now and then a little bit more often, maybe. You know, it's not, people always look at these things as bad, you know.
Well, because we've gone so excessive, right? People now drink every night. You know, people drink wine every night. It's become such the norm. People drink coffee at night. You know, the whole donut thing, like everything's become so obsessive instead of really finding that balance point. There's really no food that's bad for you.
But it's also, don't you think, there isn't. It's the moderation and it's the way you do it.
Is a donut bad for you? Of course it is bad for you if you ate it every day. But let's say once every 2 months, I love donuts and I want to have a donut. Is it bad for me? No, it's not. The stress of it would be worse physiologically, thinking about it and stressing about it. But if I'm, not that I really like donuts, but if I'm living in this place, I have enough resiliency and adaptability to really cushion having that donut. And that's what health is about. Because if you're eating in a way and you're doing keto and any of these restrictive diets, and you add carbs back in or you do something and you fucking fall apart, that tells you a lot about what you're doing and how it's absolutely doing nothing to support your health. Nothing.
And that's a big thing I wanted to touch on just now. I've got clients that would have some sugar, some carbs, and just have like this complete intolerant reaction to carbohydrates. And they're like, I can't eat carbs. You know, they're so bad for me. They just don't work for me. So I can't eat carbohydrates. But they're actually, everybody needs carbohydrates.
Yeah. We don't produce enzymes to break them down for shits and giggles. We need them. It's just, we overeat them. It's about finding that balance, and people undereat protein. So even if you don't eat a lot of them, people undereat protein, you're essentially in a high carb diet, you know. And when you look at the standard American diet, or, you know, the standard diet where most people live, it's a lot of processed foods. And it's not even though it's a lot of processed foods, it's people are getting so much fat, which bumps their calories up, and we're not active enough. And two, they're getting such low protein, and that creates such an imbalance. And that's what's creating that kind of low blood sugar or hyperinsulinic state.
And then you've got the other end of the scale where people are not eating health foods like carbohydrates, just simple fruit and roots, and then they become intolerant to carbohydrate.
Right.
And think there's something wrong with the food when it's actually their system that can't break down carbohydrate. Same with people who go vegan for a while. They need time to reintroduce meat and do it slowly, right? Or it's a stress to the system.
Yeah, and like I said, you have to honor where you came from. And you have to go slow and honor that. So if you were keto, you can't just add carbs back in because you've desensitized your body's ability to essentially process them.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to honor that and go slow, because if you don't, you're going to gain weight. If you've been vegan, you've kind of increased or decreased your immunity because you've decreased your body's ability to produce hydrochloric acid. So of course, there's going to be a lot of gut issues and immune system issues. But when you add meat back in or protein, you're going to have to go really slow. So you just have to honor where you're at. And that's just that awareness. The problem is most people just want to go 0 to 100 overnight. And the healing process doesn't work like that. The healing process doesn't work like Amazon. It just doesn't.
Click and collect, and there it is at your door. So, Josh, I've really enjoyed this chat with you today. It's been awesome.
I appreciate it.
I can smell potatoes frying downstairs, so I can't continue any longer. I need to go eat. But please tell us about your program and how you're working with people, how they can find you. I have to say a personal recommendation, because Josh actually helped me when I was so broken and I had no energy. I had chronic insomnia, night sweats. I had absolutely no appetite. And Josh was the guy that helped me. So it comes from a personal recommendation, not just a professional recommendation. So, Josh, how can people get in touch with you? What courses are you offering at the moment? And also, he has his beautiful wife, Jeanne, who is his better half, I have to say, but she's half of East West Healing as well. So check her out too, because she does coach as well.
Yeah, we both do the same thing. We just have our own clients. So you can find us on our website at eastwesthealing.com. You can find our social media on there. I mean, our Facebook is East West Healing. Our Instagram is Real Food Gangsters. And both of those can be found on our website. So when you go to our website, you have a few options. You can always, and we've done this for 20 years, you can find a link, let's talk. You can set up a free 15-minute consult. We have clients all over the globe. Our business is virtual. So anyone can set up a 15-minute consult so we can learn more about you, give you some input. There's no obligation. It's not so we can tell you. A lot of people work with us and a lot of people don't. So that's your first option. The second is we do one-on-one coaching with clients all over the globe, and that's on our website. So if you set up a 15-minute consult, we can always talk about that. And then we do have our group coaching program, which is actually going right now. The next one starts in September. So if you go to our website and you click on, I think it's nutrition coaching, you'll get 2 boxes. One says group coaching. You click on that and you can enter your email. So when we launch it again in September, you kind of know where it's at. But if you go to our website, you can find everything. You can set up a consult, learn more about what we do. But we have so many clients in Australia, so many clients in New Zealand, because our business is just virtual and it works great.
Oh, it's such an amazing part of being in the world right now. People talk about technology being a stress, but it can also be really good for you because we're so connected. Yes.
Our business has always been virtual. I'm not sure how we got to that, but it's not, for the most part, it's always been virtual and it's been great. We use phone, Skype, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, you name it. Yeah.
I think it's it's easy too. I had to get something FedExed from the States the other day. It's amazing what we can do in this world,
Yeah.
So thanks so much, Josh. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me
on the show. And I would love if anyone listening would DM me or DM Josh to let us know if you took something away from this talk today that you implemented in your life and how it created change for you. We'd love to hear that. And we'll join you for the next show. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
I'm Leila Lutz, and you've been listening to The Body Never Lies. If you haven't yet, please go to your favourite podcast app and subscribe, rate and review this podcast. All the resources and references from this episode are waiting for you on my website, leilalutz.com. Just click on podcast and look for this episode. Now join me next week for another episode of The Body Never Lies. Thank you so much for listening.